ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Thursday at noon. This is our speaker series live from YWCA South Florida. My name is Sarah Coleman. I'm the Senior Director of Race and Gender Equity, and I am happy to see you all here at lunchtime. Hopefully, you're having some yummy yums. This is a live virtual discussion about important social justice issues in the South Florida community. So as I mentioned earlier at the top, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. And I will leave time at the end of the discussion for questions if you have some. So if you've been following along with YWCA South Florida social media, you will have noticed that October has been an extremely busy month, including our First But Not the Last Gala, our Pretty Empowered event last weekend, 60 years of Head Start, which we're so happy to celebrate. We had Spirit Week last week with our little ones. We're fully knee deep in Breast Cancer Awareness Month with our breast and cervical cancer screenings. We celebrated Indigenous Peoples Day, and happy Diwali to all those who celebrate. And yeah, it's a lot of things, but at YWCA South Florida, we're used to it because we want our services, our efforts, and our work to reflect the community that we serve. And if you've been following along this whole month, you will know that we are nearing the end of our national YWCA USA Week Without Violence campaign. This year's theme is Safe Beginnings, protecting mothers, nurturing futures, and focuses on supporting mothers and their children as they build hopeful and healthier futures. Within that Week Without Violence campaign, today is day 4, and we're zeroing in on the topic, Leaving Isn't Easy, Understanding the Barriers That Mothers Face. So I want to start by saying this is an especially heavy topic. It might touch some of you personally. I know it touches me personally. And I do want to say that if you need to step away, if you need to take space, please take care of yourselves during this discussion. This is a safe space. It is a brave space. So we want you to do what you need to do to take care of yourselves. That being said, I do, without further ado, want to introduce our guest today who will be helping us navigate this topic. Her name is Dr. Monique Dennis Spence. She is the founder of Freedom Heart Foundation. Freedom Heart Foundation provides critical resources for domestic violence survivors, but also seeks to raise awareness about the complexities and challenges that survivors face. She does this through workshops, support networks, and community events. And the foundation creates a safe space for healing and growth, helping survivors. This is my favorite part, helping survivors reclaim their narratives and rebuild their lives. I have to say, I met Dr. Monique Dennis Spence at a focus group that YWCA was conducting for a research project. And it was all about the barriers that women in Miami-Dade County face. And so it makes a lot of sense that she was there and that she is also in this space because she clearly is an advocate for women and the rights of women. So Dr. Monique Dennis Spence, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're super excited to have you. And as I mentioned, this is a really intense topic, but I kind of want to start on the lighter side and just have you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then how you started Freedom Heart Foundation. What is it? Why is it? How is it? All the things.
Yeah, sure. And welcome everybody here today. It's definitely a pleasure to be here. So the Freedom Heart Foundation started as a catalyst to really help survivors. I am a domestic violence survivor, and interestingly enough, when it was time for me to leave, I fortunately had somewhere to go. A lot of women, as I will probably talk about more in our discussion, and men as well, don't have an outlet, don't have a place to actually go to escape from their abuser. So I saw a need, well, let me see how I can help the situation and help those that are in need give them tools and resources on how they can leave, and then even more importantly, once they have left, how to, as Sarah mentioned, reclaim their lives. So we do what I call in-reach. Everybody knows about outreach. But I created a curriculum called the Path Forward, and it's what we do for our in reach aspects of the Freedom Heart Foundation. So we go into the shelters, and there we have a number of shelters here throughout Miami-Dade County. We go in and we love on the women. We give them self-empowerment tools and tactics, life skills training, talk to them about survival skills, and even give them some time to pamper themselves and be able to pretty much reclaim their self-confidence that they may have lost. And then also too, a lot of times, and we're going to talk about that today, they're mothers and they have their children. So we don't want to leave them out. So we work with the children as well, and we throw parties for the children. We do an Easter party. We're getting ready for our Halloween distribution. So we love on the kids as well, and we go in and we have mentors that talk to the kids and get them to open up and understand that even though they may be in a different type of situation temporarily, they are still loved. So it's all about really making sure that women have the understanding that, you know what, you may be in this situation, you may have escaped, but there's always, always, always room for advancement, improvement, self-reliance, resilience, and rebuilding and reclaiming your lives. So Freedom Heart Foundation has been the conduit to really try to help get these people back on track and let them know that life is worth living and they can do whatever they can to live their lives effectively.
Wow, that's such a like a beautiful mission. I loved everything you just said. I think one thing I'm really, really learning this week is the story that we think in our heads about domestic violence and the women and the mothers who experience it versus the actual reality of their lives. And how much energy you and places like we visited Lotus House yesterday, how much energy there are people putting into giving mothers back their narrative, their dignity, their resilience, empowering them. So I'm so grateful that Freedom Heart is doing that work. I wonder if you could talk to us um, a little bit about the barriers women, mothers are facing when they are trying to leave an abusive relationship.
Yeah, interestingly enough, the dynamic is really, really hard, particularly for mothers, right? Mothers that are, pregnant, right? And then mothers that have the children as well. That dynamic is just so very different than somebody else that might just be able to leave because they have their children, right? And then some of them may be pregnant. Believe it or not, there are high incidences of domestic violence while women are pregnant. And that's actually at a higher rate than it is for women that might not have kids or that might not be pregnant, which is unfortunate. So there's a lot of things that go into how can there be best practices or better approaches for women that are pregnant or for ones that have children in order to be able to leave. There's a lot that goes into that, thinking about a mother and what she may be facing or what she may be dealing with. How can she leave when she has children, right? Especially perhaps if her significant other is the breadwinner and there might be financial strain. So how is she going to be able to leave? And then there's also fear of retaliation. That's another barrier, right?
Mm.
Especially for a pregnant woman, for them to be able to leave their partner that they're carrying their child, there's that guilt that they face as well. So there's so many different dynamics, and I think that particularly for pregnant women, they have to deal with their health issues and things like that.
Yeah,
So it makes it very hard for them to just leave. There's so
yeah.
many other layers that they have to face. So it's like, do I leave and deal with the things that may come with that, or do I stay and endure the abuse and try to figure things out? So being pregnant and being a mom and having kids is a totally different spectrum when it comes to trying to leave. It really makes it a lot more difficult and harder for a mom to leave their abusive situation.
And I imagine it might make it easier for the abuser because they are that much more vulnerable as if they're pregnant or if they have children in the
Right.
picture.
Absolutely. It's almost as
Mhm.
if the abuser has more of a rein, a
Mhm.
tighter rein on the one that they're abusing because they're thinking in their minds, oh, well, they're, especially if they're pregnant, oh, they're really not going to leave now. And
Yeah.
then what ends up happening, there's more control in that, right? There can be even more financial strain. There can be
Mhm.
even more, unfortunately, more abuse because it's like they know in their minds, they're thinking, they're not going anywhere, especially
Right.
being pregnant. And then when there are kids in the picture, that makes the dynamic even more scarier because you have those kids that, whatever age range they may be, that the mother is not going to want to take the children out of that home where
Right.
their significant other, the father of the children, might be. So that makes it even harder for them to leave. And then, especially too, with children, the younger, we talked about this yesterday in the event at the Healing Sanctuary, the
Mhm.
younger the children are, the more that they are able to grasp and understand, believe it or not, what may be going on as it relates to domestic violence. So, what ends up happening, they become a part of that whole viewpoint of domestic violence and thinking that, in fact, it is okay when it is, in fact, not.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
it makes the dynamic a lot different for moms to leave.
That is so complex and difficult. I it makes me think about what might be running through the mom or the woman's head, and those sort of like hidden barriers. Like we know financial, we know the physical, we know like, familial barriers to leaving. But what are some of those like hidden barriers that a mom or a woman might have to face?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that we've noticed, mental health, right? People don't
Mhm.
realize that when particularly a mom or a mom that has children or pregnant mom is going through domestic violence, it takes a toll on their mental health. And what ends up happening sometimes because of that mental health and what they may be dealing with, they might not have clarity in the moment and might not be clear-minded to understand that they are in a domestic violence situation or an abusive situation. And that can really harm and play on their mindset, right?
Mhm.
So that leaves them stuck in a situation where they might not even realize that what they're experiencing is a form of domestic violence, right?
Right.
Sometimes, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, sometimes domestic violence is not necessarily the physical. There's the emotional, there's the mental, there's the financial, right? And particularly with moms, some of those hidden barriers, if their mental health isn't in check, then they're not sure what's going on. And because of that, they can't make those clear decisions on leaving. And even
Mhm.
further, they can't make the clear decision on even developing a plan to try to leave, right? Protecting themselves as well as their children or their unborn child. So I would definitely say mental health is one
Yeah.
of those hidden barriers. And I think also too, talking about like the clarity and not having an understanding of where they can go, right? Which is another barrier. A lot of women, just generally, and moms in particular, they don't know of a safe space where they can actually go, where they can feel safe, right? They
Mhm.
have that in the back of their mind if they do leave. Will my abuser find me? Will my
Mhm.
abuser come after me? What happens if I do leave and the abuser finds out where I am? That can only make it worse. So
Yeah.
again, it plays on their psyche and not really having an understanding of, okay, can I really leave? And
Yeah.
that's very, very difficult, especially for a mom, because you have the dynamics of the children in the mix. And if they're pregnant, then that makes it even worse because, again, another hidden barrier is healthcare. So, what
Yeah.
if their significant other, who is the abuser, is providing for them as it relates to their health care, for the care of their unborn child? So those are some of the hidden barriers that we've seen, particularly with moms.
Wow, it's so layered.
Yeah, it is. It
It's
is.
so, so layered in like a partnership to
Right.
get out of that partnership when you've been
Yes.
in it for however long. I mean, it's just it's a lot. So I thank you for like, expressing like explaining all of that because I think we see we see what we see in front of our faces, but we don't see what goes on behind that. So I appreciate you really breaking it down for us. And I think you did already hit on some of these, but sort of those misconceptions that people have about why
Right.
women stay.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so what we found from time to time is that one of the misconceptions that if somebody stays, then they're considered weak, right?
Mm,
Which again is not necessarily, the case, right? So we've found that sometimes. And then also too, if somebody gets in a position where they're with their significant other and there might be some religious or cultural norms
mhm.
as to why they can't leave, right? So again, some of those come into play and it makes it difficult because here it is, you have, the woman that is being abused and she's not sure and can't make heads or tails of what she should do. And particularly if her abuser is continuing to abuse her over and over and over again, and they are a part of a situation where religion comes into play, then she has to
Mhm.
decide based on her values, do I stay in this situation and or do I leave? And that might go against traditional values that they may have based on their religion or cultural practices. So that makes it a difficult, even more difficult situation. And then also too, going back to the weak-mindedness.
Yeah,
Somebody thinking that, oh, me staying, I'm, weak, and people on the outside viewing that as something that's a hindrance, when in
yeah,
fact, no, when you leave, that shows resilience and strength and being strong. While it is hard, don't get me wrong, right? It takes away that misconception of, okay, well, I'm staying in this situation, I'm meek and I'm humble, and, I just don't know what to do. So
yeah,
that goes back to the mental health aspect as well. But with the weak-mindedness, people have to understand everybody that's in an abusive situation, every time that they may be going through something, everybody's situation is different. There's nobody's situation that is exactly the same. And
yeah,
so they have to have within themselves that power, that self-reliance, that self-drive to say when enough is enough and understand that they can go ahead and try to leave that situation. But those misconceptions, I would say, the weak-mindedness and then also the religious and the cultural norms
yeah.
really, really, really play an important factor based on, women and why they don't leave.
Those are huge. I
Mhm.
mean,
Mhm.
yeah. As so I used to be predominantly in sort of like disability rights, and culture and religion played such a
Yeah.
huge role in how families dealt with those issues. So I totally, yeah, I can see that. And it's
Yeah.
something I hadn't thought about, but yeah.
Right. Yep. And if I
Um,
could just add to that as well,
sure,
because I
absolutely.
think our churches and,
Mhm.
our spirituality and finding our spiritual institutions and things of that nature, I think they play a very, very vital role, right? In helping women. So I know that there are resources out there where I think just relying on your faith and what you believe in, whatever you might believe in, right? For me, it's God, but everybody's
Mhm.
different. But I think having that as a cornerstone to helping women leave. So, again, if they're in a situation where religious norms might come into play, is it worth, if they go and talk to their parishioner or their pastor, their preacher, and really get an understanding, Pastor, I'm going through this at home, but my
Yeah.
religion and cultural norms are different, help me try to navigate that. And I think with that, leaning on that and the
Mhm.
parishioner, pastor, what have you, having an understanding of the total picture can
Mhm.
help them dissect and really figure out their next steps or what it is that they might be able to do, taking into consideration whatever those religious norms are. Because if you think about it, tradition, if we go back, you stay.
Oh, yeah.
You stay.
Yeah.
You tough it out. You
Yep.
stay, you make it work, whatever the case may be. But I think because of the work that the Y does and, Freedom Heart Foundation and these other organizations talking about, ways on how you can leave and just talking about domestic violence awareness in general, helps to heighten the awareness and gives people choices and
Yeah.
decisions and thoughts and ideas on how they can leave and other ways that domestic violence awareness can just come into the fold in the picture.
Oy. I When you were just talking, I was imagining what I think a lot of people view as domestic violence, and what I think the like image people might have of like leaving a domestic violence situation as like, a woman scrambling through the house, packing a suitcase and like running
Right.
for her life,
That right,
but like,
right.
does it ever, I mean, it might look like that, but I have a feeling it doesn't always look like that. So
Right.
if you could just maybe talk a little bit about like, what does leaving an abusive relationship really look like?
Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah.
is it? What happens?
Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah. And, interestingly enough, I think it's different for everyone, right? I know
hmm
some of the things with the survivors that we've worked with and been able to help. It could be, like you mentioned, the scrambling and getting out the door and, hurrying up. But a lot of times it isn't, right? And if I could just take everyone back, think about, when we were all in COVID and the pandemic.
hmm
Talk about
yeah,
heightened domestic violence cases everywhere throughout the country, right?
yeah,
But at the same time, people in those situations and going through domestic violence, particularly in COVID, they were able to assess their situation and develop a plan, right? Where they would be able to leave, right? So I
hmm
think in some instances, people are able to develop that plan. And again, I think that's why awareness and us talking about domestic violence in general helps because it
yeah,
brings that awareness. But getting back to different ways on how or how women can actually leave, developing a plan. It might not be where you're leaving tomorrow. It might not be where you're leaving 2 weeks. But if you put a plan in place on, maybe putting some money away and hiding it under a mattress, right? Maybe having an emergency bag. Nobody has to know that you're putting this together, but
hmm
putting something, where you may have some essentials that you can put aside. So when you do get that moment where you can leave, you have some things that you can take with you. And especially if you do have children or you're pregnant, thinking about that as well. Some of the other ways also too, talking to people outside of your circle where you
yeah,
can try to find somebody that you can confide in that might be able to help. Where, what we've been able to do is, help women leave by relying on like their best friend or somebody that they're close to and say, okay, you know what? We're going on a trip. Sometimes that might work.
yeah,
Sometimes that may not, just depending on how controlling the abuser might be. But it provides an outlet where if I'm going with my friend and we're going out, then they can make it look like they're going on this trip, a weekend getaway. They get together, somebody comes and picks up the person, they have their bag, and they're able to leave and they don't look back, right?
yeah,
So I think that there's different ways and it looks different for everyone. And as I mentioned, having someone that I would say a victim can confide in and rely on that can help them, right? They can talk to that
mhm,
person and let them know, I really want to leave the situation. Can you help me? Right?
yeah,
And then we have resources. We have shelters all throughout Miami-Dade County that act as a catalyst to help these women. You talk about Lotus House. I know there's in
mhm,
transition north and south. So we have shelters everywhere that can help women in these types of situations. And if especially if they need to leave immediately, they do have somewhere to go. They
yeah,
do have somewhere to go, but it does look different for everyone.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned having a friend or even like someone outside of your circle. So say, we're just hanging out as friends and your friend turns to you and says, I need to leave the situation I'm in. I need to get out. What
Mhm.
is something that I should say to them?
Yeah,
What is like the first step
right.
and how do we respond?
Sure. So I would say the first thing, we have to listen, right? Because I think a lot of times we rush to judgment and we rush to,
Mhm.
okay, you got to leave now, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But what people don't understand, sometimes they might not be in that position to do that, right? That's the first thing I would say. The second thing, it takes a lot of courage for somebody that is going through domestic violence to be able to, one, say that they're in a situation, and
Yeah.
also two, get to the point where they want to leave. So if they are confiding in someone, I would tell that person, as I mentioned, to really listen and figure out a way that they can help this person, because the person, the victim might not be able to help themselves. So if
Mm-hmm.
there's a way where the person that they're confiding in can actually be that person to help them develop that plan, right? To help them say, okay, you know what? Let me look into some resources on how to get you out, and
Yeah.
let them know that they'll be there with them every step of the way. Because a lot of times, domestic violence survivors feel like they're on an island and they cannot talk to anyone or rely
Mhm.
on anyone or even come forward and letting someone know that they're in it. A lot of times, people don't even realize that somebody that they know may be in a domestic
Yeah.
violence situation.
Mm-hmm.
People walk around with masks all day long and they endure what they endure at home, and people would never know.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times, being able to, one, listen to your friend and whatever it is that she's saying. I mean, really listen, right? No
Mm-hmm.
judgment, no, okay, you got to go now. Let's go now and get your bag, because you never know if you're going back to that situation, it might be even worse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say, take a moment, think about how you might be able to help this person and see what resources may be out there that can help. And then also to figure out where their mindset might be in this whole situation. And because a lot of times, women say, okay, yeah, I want to leave, I'm ready to leave. And what ends up happening? They go back, and so I think, again, having an understanding on where the victim's mindset and where they are right now, which is why I think it's so important that people listen, because they
Yeah.
get an idea of, okay, well, are you ready to leave now? How can I help you do that?
Yeah.
Do we need to develop a plan? Let's, contact a shelter and figure out how we can get you out. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it really listening and being whatever that victim may need at that moment, because that will help them muster up the strength and the courage eventually to be able to leave. So yeah, I would definitely say some of those things to help.
Yeah, that's yeah, because I can't imagine. And you're right, it comes out of nowhere. Like people are walking around every day just with their own stories going on, and
Right,
having a friend coming to you and saying something like that would be just like,
right.
oh my gosh, what do we
Right.
do?
Right.
So,
And a lot of times, I'm sorry, a lot of times too, what I think, if you think of, you think someone may be going through domestic violence or being abused, I think it's okay for us to take the lead and say, Sarah, are you okay? Is everything
mhm.
okay? Right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can be that open door to get somebody to open up if we think, versus, brushing it off
Yeah.
or like, oh, you know what? I'm sure she's all right. No, I think we as people helping one another just generally do need to ask our fellow friend, are you
Yeah.
okay? And we
That's
don't do that
that's
enough.
That's interesting, and I'm wondering if maybe you can share a little bit. 'Cause again, I think when people think domestic violence, they think of someone getting punched in the face, but
Right.
what can domestic violence consist of? Like, what are
Yeah.
all the various ways
Right.
abuse
And
can
they're,
happen?
yeah, and interesting. People do think of, okay, they see a black eye, that's domestic violence, and that's all it is. And
Mhm.
that's bad. Don't get me wrong, right?
Right. Oh,
Nobody
yeah,
wants
of
to be a
course. Yeah.
punching bag, right?
Yeah.
But there are so many other elements and layers to domestic violence. The emotional abuse, right?
Mhm.
I know, my abuser, and there were signs there, but my abuser was emotionally abusive,
Mm.
verbally abusive. I brushed it off as in, okay, they're having a bad day or it'll get better, and it never did, right? And
Yeah.
usually those are the precursors to the physical. But the emotional abuse and the verbal abuse, they do so much damage, and
Yeah.
they really take a toll on somebody's self-esteem and their
Mhm.
self-love and their confidence. I know for me, my self-confidence was so low because my abuser was telling me, you would never be anything and you think you're perfect. And so all of these things you're hearing day in and day out,
Yeah.
It really does take a toll. So the emotional abuse, the verbal abuse, and then we talk about financial abuse, and particularly with mothers and those that, may be pregnant. That financial abuse, it takes a hold on a mom who might need something for their child, and the abuser will withhold whatever financial needs there may be in order for the child to be healthy, in order for the child to
Wow.
eat. And a
Yeah.
lot of times, what the abuser will do, they'll take it out on the child to get to the mom, just because that, again, is a form of abuse as well, right? And so all of that plays on the mom's thoughts and the
Mm-hmm.
mom's mental health. And it just makes the mom shut down, and in
Yeah.
a way where they become a part of that whole cycle of abuse, and they get caught in that web, and sometimes they just don't know what to do. So I would say the
Yeah.
financial abuse for sure, the emotional abuse, being called names.
Mm-hmm.
Things may start off, oh, you're such and such, and it might be innocent, you would think. But there's truth and just, as I say, right? There's those undertones where people say things, and you have to really listen to what they're saying, because it could be a put down and a letdown underneath some laughs. But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, that's still abuse. It's
Yeah.
still domestic violence, right? Telling
Absolutely.
somebody that there'll never be anything day in and day out, calling them names, the
Yeah.
verbal abuse, that takes a toll on you. And if you're in a
Absolutely.
situation where, you're in love with someone and they're causing all of this abuse, then it puts you in a situation where it's like, do I leave? Do I stay? What's going on? What's happening? And you're evaluating everything because you're not
Mm-hmm.
sure of anything. You're
Yeah.
you're not sure of anything. So I would have to say financial abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse really does take a toll on somebody's psyche, and it takes a long time for somebody to get out of that.
Right.
Through healing and prayer and counseling, there are ways to get out of it and get over it. But that takes such a toll on you mentally, where it does a lot of damage that you can't see. You cannot
Yeah.
see. It does a
I
lot of
mean,
damage.
I imagine like the trauma for the woman, the children, all of it is probably so deep, and
Right.
it's got to be so hard. I can't, I mean, all of these scenarios, I'm just trying to imagine myself in them, and
Right.
like
Right.
I just feel like it would be it just sounds so
Oh
hard.
yeah.
And
Oh
it
yeah.
honestly makes me more thankful for organizations like Freedom Heart Foundation, because I I think, you mentioned your own experience with
Mhm.
abuse.
Mhm.
And, it's sort of like the nothing about us without us. You know what these women have experienced, what
Yes.
they're thinking, the process, all the things it took to leave.
Yes.
And so I guess we talked about like if a friend comes to you,
Mhm.
but what is someone, if they're listening right now,
Mhm.
if they feel trapped,
Mhm.
or unsafe, what would you tell them the first step to take?
Yeah. The first thing I would do is tell them to find someone that they can confide in, right?
Mhm.
I think a lot of times, and I think I mentioned this earlier, domestic violence survivors, it's very, very, very hard for them to even talk about their situation, right? I mean, it takes courage beyond courage to be able to say, something is going on in my home, right? Because
Mhm.
nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be in that situation. So when you get to a point where you can confide in someone, that is an outlet. And I think by a victim having an outlet that they feel comfortable, right? Just taking that first step, right? Comfortable enough to talk with someone, right? I think that would be
Mhm.
one instance. Now, on the same token, there might be people who don't feel comfortable talking with someone that they know, and that's okay too, right? So that's where I would say they find a pastor, a preacher, a counselor, someone that might not know their inner circles or inner workings that
Right.
they can confide in and let that person know what may be going on in their home. Because again, if they're on the outside, there's no judgment. There's no, oh, well, you need to leave them now, and
Right.
you're crazy, and you might not get any of that. It just depends on the person and what they might feel more comfortable with. And then I also say too, if it's a dangerous situation and they're fleeing for their life, again, as I mentioned, we have our shelters throughout Miami-Dade County where they can call, and
Hmm.
there might not be an instance where they need to leave right that instance, but it might be something that the shelter can give them, a resource or somebody that they can talk to that can talk them through what it is that they may be going through, right? And I know with our organization, with Freedom Heart Foundation, if someone is going through something, we can help as be a conduit, if you will, and find out what may be going on with that person. If they do need shelter, we can help them do with that. If they do want to talk with someone, we can do that. And then
Hmm.
also too, that it's something that I think is very, very important. Our foundation has what we call survivor circles. And what we do is we bring women together because, again, it's not something that where domestic violence victims feel like they can just openly communicate and talk. But
Yeah.
if they can find a safe space where they can talk, then they can
Mhm.
come and be a part of a supportive environment where they can feel free to share. And like I said, they might
Mhm.
not be ready to leave at that moment, but if they are in a place where they feel safe to talk about what they may be going through, then they can get that support from a good place, right? On
Yeah.
how they can build up their self-esteem enough where they can say, okay, you know what? I'm ready. Enough is enough, and I think I'm ready to leave, and I can go ahead and leave. So
Mhm.
I think, finding a friend, and if they can't find a friend, finding somebody else like a pastor, preacher, and then if not, support circles, finding
Yeah.
people like-minded that may be going through that situation that they can communicate with and talk with just to get it out. Because what ends up happening once a domestic violence survivor starts talking and gets out what it is that they may be going through, it's freeing. It
Yeah.
really frees them, and they're able to look at a different picture, right? And look through a different lens based on their life and where they are and where they want to be, and maybe
Yeah.
develop a way to get there. So
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Awesome. Yeah, I imagine that moment of clarity that they finally reach is very healing, maybe.
Right, right.
You just started to sort of talk about Freedom Heart Foundation, but I want to take a second to really explore how Freedom Heart Foundation honors survivors of domestic violence. Could you just share all the different ways you guys work with women?
Yeah, sure. So we have an annual retreat, Thriving Retreat. And what we do in that, we will bring in mental health counselors, we'll bring in financial management counselors, and self-empowerment coaches to really help women. And it's not just for domestic violence survivors. That's the crux of who we really help. But everybody is a survivor of something in their own way,
Mhm.
right? So we really dive into how surviving situations, whether domestic violence, verbal abuse, mental abuse, whatever it may be, how you can become your most resilient self and navigate life's complexities, not just in that situation, but going forward. So we do
Mhm.
that every year. We also have one of my favorites is a glow night, where we
Ooh.
shine a light on domestic violence and we invite survivors and we honor them, right? And
Mhm.
we give them, some of them, the mic to be able to openly talk about their situations, how they left, what they may be going through, how they've overcome their situations. And we award them and we love on them, and we just honor them for the resilience that they have. And so we bring in again the Domestic Violence Oversight Board with Miami-Dade County, and that just helps us honor survivors. So we do that as
Mhm.
well. We have another event, Light the Night, where it's a bonfire. We usually do that in like in November, December, where it might be a little, I won't say
Yeah.
cold in South Florida, but maybe a
Cooler.
little crisp in the
Yeah.
air. And we bring survivors and we have them write something that they want to forget or something that they're going to make a promise to themselves. And we have a bonfire and we have them throw it into the fire. And
Yeah.
we do like a prayer and, just it's like a kumbaya moment, right?
Yeah.
Where survivors, they have that feeling where they're just letting go of things that are holding them back. And
Mm-hmm.
what we have seen time to time, just from the bonfire alone, just that simple practice of throwing what it is in the fire that they want to let go of, by the
Mm-hmm.
time maybe 3 to 6 months rolls around, their mindset, they've been able to let go of what it is that they want to let go of and
Yeah.
really move forward in life. So, so we do that as well.
That's
We
amazing.
have our conversations of courage, where that's a time where we really have our women come and talk about their situations. Because I think if women are able to share what they've gone through or what
Yep.
it is that they're going through, then that only helps the
Mm-hmm.
next woman be able to garner some strength with whatever their situation is. So,
Yeah.
we make sure that we bring in somebody from every demographic. So we have somebody from the LGBTQ community who's a domestic
Mm-hmm.
violence survivor, right? We have somebody from the Indian population. So just some of
Yeah.
everybody that can come in. So if a survivor is there, they can make sure that they're being met wherever they
Yeah.
are. So the
That's
conversations
amazing.
of courage is really another one of our major components. So yeah, so those are some of the activities that we have. And then, like I
Yeah.
mentioned, we go into the shelters and we do our in-reach, and that's where
Yeah.
we
I love
really.
inReach. That's so
Right,
good.
right. Everybody knows
Yeah.
about outreach, which
Yeah.
is great, but we really like to go into the shelters and meet the women where they are
Mm-hmm.
and love on them and their children and let them know that you know what, you may be in this situation right now, but it's just temporary, right?
Yeah.
And we try to give them the tools they need to get on to the next phase of their
Yeah.
life and what that looks like because they don't know. They don't know
Yeah.
what that looks like for them. So we
I
try to
yeah, and
give
I
them
think
picture of
that's a
that.
huge part of like, just leave. It's like
Yes.
just leave and then what? You
Right.
know,
Yep,
leave and then
exactly.
what comes
Yep.
after.
Right,
So,
right. They don't know. And which a lot of
yeah.
times because of that, women don't know how to leave because they can't
Yeah.
they can't see beyond their situation.
Yeah.
So we try to help the women understand that this is temporary, but there's a whole life on the other side of all of
Right.
this that can only blossom. It can only blossom. You got to believe in it, believe in yourself, and we try to instill that in the ladies to say, you know what, I got this. So we do.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
love that. And I love that there's, representation of, the many diverse peoples of
Yes.
Miami-Dade County who have
Yes.
gone through domestic violence,
Yes.
It's like when you can see yourself in someone else and what
That's
they've
right.
gone through, it's
Exactly.
empowering and it's
That's right.
encouraging. So
Exactly.
that's wonderful.
Yes,
I
exactly.
want to give some of our guests the opportunity to ask questions in the chat. Um, I know we have a good amount of people here. So if anybody has any questions, if they feel brave enough to come off of mute and share or ask questions, we'd be happy to hear from you. Yeah, go for it.
And no question is off the record, so,
Yeah, that's
um,
right. And like again, I said this is a safe space. We're here to talk about it. So
I can share something. Hi.
sure.
So this is a very controversial topic, and definitely, as you said, Sarah, at the beginning, so it can touch many or a few of us. So I can share my own experience through violence. So for 30 years, I lived with my husband, who was very, at the beginning, was physical. Then he promised to change, no more physical violence, but then it was psychological, which is worse than
mhm.
physical, I would say. Because I was living in Mexico with no family, so I was afraid of being alone. I was not brave. I would say, I'm not gonna say brave enough. I had no support. I didn't know where to go. So
Mhm.
I stayed in the family where everybody was against, at some point, against me for being from a different country, for coming from a different culture. So, and I was trapped in that family and country where I didn't know anything about. So it was just, you are stuck in here. There are no programs like here in Miami-Dade or here in the US where they support people who are coming from other countries and they are asking for help. Women in Mexico are constantly, hurt, and they are trapped in in some of that culture. I'm not gonna generalize. I don't think it's everywhere in Mexico, but depending on the socio-economical status the family is, so is how they treat the women. Women are supposed to be home taking care of the kids.
Mhm.
They get some portion of the salary of the man, and then they need to use the money to buy food, and they have no right of nothing. When I started thinking about starting a career and going to work, he always stopped me like, no, no, you cannot leave the house because this is not a safe place to be out. So, and then I was fear every day. So fear to go outside. There is violence outside. If you go outside, you're gonna be kidnapped. You're gonna be, and then I started, making some connections and starting a life with his permission.
Mhm.
And it was hard, and because I come from a family where my parents got divorced when I was 6 years old, and I was a witness of all the situation between my mother and my father. So I was afraid to give that to my daughter too. So, and then I decided to stay there until my daughter could understand. And then she was young when she realized that she was living in an environment where violence was something natural, including humiliation. So physical, physical, how could I say, when they call out names like, listen, nobody's gonna look at you because you have this and this physical characteristic, and who is gonna take care of you but me? And then you
Yeah.
start feeling that you depend totally on that person, and then you said, okay, he's right, because they know how to manipulate your mind. They are they could be how do you say, psychopath, and so they take your brain and they do whatever they want to do. And even though you decide to go away, you go away and then you come back because you feel useless. It takes a while to make that decision, but I can tell you that it only we need to make the decision for me was 30 years. So I came to the US with him. So we started a life here, and 2 years ago, one day I said, I'm done. I want you out. He left and he came back after 3 months begging to stay because he didn't have where to stay. So because of my daughter again, who is 29 years old, he stayed there for another year because he didn't have where to live. And then one day, September 2023, I said, I'm done. I need you to pack, and I don't want to see you no more in my life. But it was if I look back, I said, how many times I tried to live that life and start from scratch, but I was not confident enough the same way that I am now, and I had no support.
I
So
think Zori, th thank you for sharing all of that. I really, I mean, I thank you for sharing that. I think you're highlighting though one of the things we were talking about, which is that like sometimes leaving takes a really long time,
Right. Yep.
like a really, really long time.
Yeah.
But you're also highlighting that on the other side of it, there is a life on the other side of it, no matter if
Yes.
it takes 30 years, like you
Mhm.
said.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know, Monique, do you have
Yeah.
anything to
Yeah, and
comment?
I'll share, and full transparency, for me, like I left twice while I was in a situation. I left twice and went back, right? But that was with a verbal the mental, that type of abuse, right? And then I did go back, and then that's when it turned physical, right? So I do think that you did get out, which is great, right? I mean, sometimes it does take time, and it gets to a point where, we all that have gone through these situations, you get to a point where enough is enough. And while it might not be easy, at least you have in your mind and your thought process that you know that this isn't right, right? So once you're able to really understand that this situation is not right, this is not the situation that I'm supposed to be in, you can start looking through the lens of, okay, how can I get out, right? Or even holding, because I know, Zori, you said it took you a while, right? But holding on to the hope, let me tell you, hope will get you far, right? I know that it might not patch up the bruises, and it might not patch up the verbal abuse and the mental abuse, but holding on to that hope and having an understanding of, you know what I'm saying? Like, I am going to get out of this situation. There is going to be an open door, an open window. There's going to be something somewhere along the lines where I'm going to be able to escape this, right? So at least you knew over that time that you knew it wasn't right, and that you knew that you had to get out. And so once you did, even though it took a long time, you did. And now look, you've been able to thrive, and your children are great. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes it does take a while, but at least you had in your mind, and you were holding on to the hope and the understanding that that situation was not for you. And you were able to look and hold on to that until you were able to get out
And let
safely,
me tell you
safely.
something, it damages our children because they learn that this is the right way to live, and they can learn that that's the experience they are going to have when they're in a relationship. So there are two things that made me do it, which is like learning more about the contact zero, which is essential. That means that once you decided, you need to block that person, block it from everywhere, including those, those friends that are, share friends that they are gonna do everything to let you know, oh, but this is a good guy, so he's missing you, and then you fall back. So just cut ties with everybody, family members, the guy, delete all the pictures. Do not stick to anything. If you made that decision, if you want to change your life, just is contact zero is the first thing to do. Don't be afraid because we can live without that person. We have our own unique values, personality, authenticity that some others see, even though that person keeps saying that you're worth nothing. So that's something that is we must do, and think about our children. They do not deserve that. They do not deserve to be exposed to that. There is another
Absolutely.
beautiful world out there of that relationship that, and no woman deserves that. So don't allow them to make a believe that we deserve that. This is what you deserve. You did something wrong in your previous life. That's why you're getting this. And then it's love and hate. Love and hate. There's no such love and hate. It's not one
Zori,
day
I
I
want to
hate you, one day I love you. They don't change, and they don't change. Do not believe there's gonna be change. There's no change.
Zori, I can hear how passionate you are about it, and I really, really appreciate it because there are probably women here or anyone listening in the future who can go back and watch this who will hear these words. So I really appreciate your passion behind this. I want to make sure I give others a chance to express themselves or ask questions. If they have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Um, in the meantime, I do want to make sure we get out some resources. Monique, can you tell us how to find Freedom Heart Foundation?
Yes, so yeah, definitely. Our website is www.iamstrongenough.org. And we're also on Instagram at IAM_strong enough. So please feel free to follow us. We're doing some great work. We love being in the community. We love making change, making a difference, and really trying to change that perspective as it relates to domestic violence awareness.
And I want to sort of touch on something Zori mentioned about being in another country, or if you are a non-citizen in this country, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which you can reach at 1-800-799-7233, or you can text them at 88788. They speak Spanish, English, Creole, and 200 other languages. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is free. Their services are free. The resources they offer are free. But for those of you who are worried about contacting someone in domestic violence work or the National Domestic Violence Hotline, I'm not sure about Freedom Heart, but you do not have to be a citizen. You do not need to be worried about ICE or drawing attention to your status, because at the National Domestic Violence Hotline, they do not care about your status. They only care about you, and getting you the help that you need. So for those of you who are sort of being kept by your status, please know that these organizations do not provide immigration status to authorities. It's confidential, and they can connect you with services that are specific to immigrant communities, including legal resources to help you with domestic violence and immigration issues. So I just wanted to make sure I said that, just because of the world we're living in today and the very diverse nature of domestic violence. And so with that, I really want to thank you, Dr. Monique. I feel like everything you said was so helpful and so thoughtful, and just gave us so much to think about. And I really, really appreciate it. And as I said at the beginning, I know this is a really tough, heavy topic, but I think talking about it makes it feel lighter. So I very much appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, definitely.
And to Zori, who shared all of that about your life, Zori, thank you. And to those of you that joined us today, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and have a wonderful rest of your week.